Alrighty, guys, thank you for joining me on another Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025. We got a very action packed episode, so let's go through, let's look at the chalkboard, what we're going to be discussing on today's show. Very action packed. I have some thoughts about the Marcus Smart to the Los Angeles Lakers. That'll be our first segment. Then our second one will be Jerry Jones's comments about Micah Parsons, the Cowboys, and whatnot on the Cowboys' first day of training camp. And then I'm going to do a little fun segment of the top 5 wingmen in NBA history. So make sure to stay tuned to the very end as we will be talking a little NBA here. It's because I saw a meme, and it was kind of like a dude sliding into a girl's DMs, and it was like he just listed a bunch of wingmen in the NBA: Scottie Pippen, Klay Thompson, all those types of guys. And the girl was like, "What? Why'd you send me second options?" He was like, "Look, you're a second option. I'm trying to look for a superstar. Can you text me your friend's number?" And we were like, "What?" I saw that and I was like, "What?" It's crazy meme. Anyways, thank you again for joining me. Now it's time to look at Marcus Smart moving in the Lakers. So let's begin. First, I want to ask you guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a link in or leave a comment down below on what your thoughts are on the Marcus Smart trade, or I guess really trade, buyout, free signing. Definitely got some opinions on that, on the buyout and then immediately sign with someone. However, Marcus Smart goes from Washington, has a buyout there, and signs a 2-year deal with the Los Angeles Lakers. Apparently, Luka had a little bit of sway in that, recruited him to Los Angeles. And so what do we think here? What are our thoughts? Well, firstly, I think this is a good move, right? Marcus Smart, former Defensive Player of the Year, goes over to a team that needed front court defense or perimeter defense, and he does the job for them. Now, if you look at their starting lineup with Marcus Smart, assuming he starts, you probably have to put him at the 1. Maybe you can get away with him at the 2. Probably Luka at the 1, or maybe Luka at the 3. But let's say Luka, Marcus Smart, Austin Reeves. Then you got LeBron and DeAndre Ayton. I don't love that starting 5, right? My first thought when I saw this signing was, okay, Marcus Smart, he's got to start because of defense. And so what that means is Austin Reeves has to go to the bench. He will be one of the best 6 men. He has a chance to win 6th Man of the Year, right? Coming off the bench, playing for the Lakers. What are you guys' thoughts on Austin Reeves going potentially to the bench? Let me know, because apparently he has the most valued contract in the NBA. And apparently he did decline a contract extension that the Lakers offered him, which isn't a bad deal on his part. He can get more next offseason with the Lakers, or even have more power by entering free agency and getting more money that way. But you cannot rock with a Luka Doncic, Austin Reeves, LeBron starting lineup. You could not, right? LeBron's not bad defensively now, even at age 40, but he's not an exception. He can't make up for a Luka and a Reeves, deficiencies there, right? Now, offensively, it's a deadly trio, including DeAndre Ayton there. That foursome's very deadly offensively. They could easily be a top 10, top 5 offense next season. However, defensively is their problem, right? So getting Marcus Smart, getting a guy that maybe doesn't have the offensive tool set that you would like as a full-time starter, but they get him on a cheap deal, helps him out defensively. And then if you maybe rock with, Luka, Smart, Rui Hachimura, which is more of a defensive guy, I think he has to be in their starting lineup. Again, another player that lacks the offensive tool set that you can depend on every night. However, that will be made up with the addition of Luka and the addition of DeAndre Ayton, because that offense is really just going to be spearheaded by Luka and Ayton. I would say majority of the time you're going to go down the court, you'll see a pick and roll with Ayton and Luka. The other guys, spread out and get open for 3 potentially for a kick out, right? You'll see LeBron create a little. You'll see Austin Reeves create a little when Luka's off the bench. And now you actually have a reliable backup, at least, for Luka in Austin Reeves, right? Someone that can initiate the offense, someone that does most of their best work when they have the ball in their hands. And you'll see him create a little bit. LeBron can also fill that role, right? I'm excited for maybe the non-Luka minutes with how this team works? Is it going to be, a Denver Nuggets situation when it's Nikola Jokic off the court with the Lakers, right? If Luka goes off the court, does their offense just completely fall flat, right? We've seen some other additions for the Lakers. Um, Nothing too fancy. Obviously, the DeAndre Ayton one, I haven't necessarily talked about it here on this podcast, but I thought that was a good upside. There's upside there, right? A 2-year deal is very weird. They're in this 2-year phase, which I don't get, right? If you're like, oh, we're preparing for the future. Well, you know, Luca has an extension that's coming up, so you're looking to extend him for the near future, but then you're signing Ayton, who's in the same draft class as Luca, to a 2-year deal, right? I get the Marcus Smart 2-year deal, some of their other guys 2-year deals, but I would say try to get Ayton for a couple more years, right? Now, again, there's question marks with them, right? Personality, worth ethic, right? He kind of dipped on the Blazers. He was like, he doesn't really play defense anyway. And he wasn't even giving effort on that side of the court. So he has potential to grow, right? And maybe he sees the Lakers as an opportunity to rejuvenate his career because he could opt out of his contract. I believe he has a player option that second year, so next offseason. And he could be if he has a good year, he could be one of the best free agents available and demand almost $100 million contract, right? But if he falls flat this year with a Luka Doncic at point guard, he could be looking at league minimums for the rest of his career. So it's a big year for Ayton. For Marcus Smart, he's kind of at the tail end of his career. However, he will be a guy on a championship roster that, he did all the dirty work. And so, again, they needed a type of guy like that on the Lakers. They didn't really have that, and now they get that with Marcus Smart. So overall, I think this is a very fun move. Yeah, I think it's fun, right? But it was a necessary move, right? When you look at other teams in the West, right? Denver with Jamal Murray, obviously the Thunder and all their guards, right? SGA, Jalen Williams, right? They have, very prominent offensive talent at a guard position. And the Lucers, as the Lakers, that should be their new nickname. The Lakers right now, they can't defend anybody before this signing off on the perimeter. That was the biggest thing. Like, they were going to get beat so poorly on the perimeter, right? Interior, that's also a big problem, right? So their defense as a whole was just a ginormous question mark. This is one move that kind of solidifies that. If they were able to get a Capella, or another interior presence, they did re-sign Jackson Hayes. You'd somewhat feel better, even though Jackson Hayes is a whole other discussion. So I still think they're 2 to 3 pieces away from, true, contending ship in the West. Just because when you look at all these teams, right, the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Rockets now, the Timberwolves, and the Mavericks when they're healthy, all of those teams have really dynamic guard play, right? Maybe they match up better against Houston, but now, you dealt with the guard situation in terms of defense. Your offense will be fine. But then you look at the other teams, like the Denver, the OKC, the Dallas, that interior presence is severely lacking, right? You're trusting DeAndre Ayton, to shut down an AD for 4 games or for a series. You're hoping you somehow lock down Jokic for a series, right? You're hoping that SGA and Chet, won't dominate you on the inside, right? How does Hartenstein, how does he play a role against the Lakers, right? We didn't see those matchups, right? The Lakers got beaten 5 by Rudy Gobert. And Rudy Gobert, as great as he is defensively, he's not the best offensive guy in the league, obviously. But he dropped 27 points in that closeout game. 27 points from Rudy Gobert. And they didn't really address that need. Yeah, you could say Ayton. No, Ayton would have to have a major improvement defensively. Do I think he's, do I think he has that potentially? I'd have to see it before I would put money on it, right? Like, I'm not going into the season, if you're depending on DeAndre Ayton to be your defensive center, that's a problem. That is a major problem. So again, let me know in the comments below what you guys think of this Lakers move, signing Marcus Smart. We've had a couple days to sit on this. I don't think it's a bad move by any means. I don't think it could be, especially because Luka wanted him too. I think that's a good move. And so you have a pretty, different range of, backcourt now with Luka and a defensive-minded Marcus Smart, but Marcus Smart can hit a three now and again. So it's, again, offensively, Luka's got you. Defensively, if Marcus Smart could be a leader that they need defensively, it's one step closer to contention. So yeah, Marcus Smart going to the Lakers. Interesting move. But now we transition into the NFL. Like I said on Monday, training camps have begun. I believe all, if not a couple, teams have started training camp. And, of course, when training camp happens, it's always the Cowboys that are catching the headlines. Every single time, it's always the Cowboys catching the headlines. And, it was kind of funny. I'm on Cowboys Twitter as a Cowboys fan, and everyone was like, oh, here we go. The press conference, the, the State of the Union address with the Cowboys, and it could not have gone any wrong. any wrong for the Cowboys. Obviously, Jerry Jones is going to make it about me. And so this is one quote that I want to read quickly about Jerry Jones and his thoughts on the Micah Parsons contract situation. He says, state, just because we sign him doesn't mean we're going to have him. He was hurt 6 games last year. Seriously, we've signed. I remember signing a player for the highest paid at the position in the league, and he got knocked out 2/3 of the year in Dak Prescott. So there's a lot of things you can think about, just as the player does when you're thinking about committing and guaranteeing money. End quote. So the crazy thing about this is he was wrong on the missed games, right? Micah Parsons missed 4, not 6. Parsons still managed to get double-digit sacks in 12 and 13 games, and he made the Pro Bowl. So, yes, getting injured sucks, but he's dealt with injuries every single year, but not to a multi-game extent like last season. Still, I don't think, he doesn't deserve the contract. You got to pay him. And now your fault, your own fault for not extending him earlier has made him more money. We've just seen TJ Watt get a massive 3-year extension. We've seen other players like a Myles Garrett get extended in the offseason, right? So now you're going to piggy up the bank. And I believe why he said this, or why he's saying random, outlandish stuff that just makes him look bad, is because, one, he's getting beat, or he had really no power when it comes to this negotiation, or at least going the way he doesn't want to. And 2, he's got to, kind of damage Micah Parsons' reputation a little bit, trying to get some power back. Because if Micah Parsons leaves in free agency next year, Dallas loses him for nothing. For absolutely nothing. Right? And I want to sign him. Because, again, I think about our defense. Our defense is easily our weakest unit this year. And if they don't re-sign him, our defense, and let's say he walks next year, our defense is terrible. It is awful. It is bottom 5 in the league, in my opinion, especially with the whole, Trevon Diggs situation and them finding him $500,000 because he's rehabbing on his own. That's a whole different discussion. I would kind of, assume a player would want to rehab with the team, but he decided to do that on his own, and they've kind of fined him for it, which, again, isn't, that's sticky. That's contract situation. But I guess, Jerry Jones, again, is pissed, right? And I think these players are kind of they just roll their eyes at him, right? But also the huge part about this is he brought Dak Prescott into it. He brought your franchise player, right? Your most marketable piece, your most controversial piece, the piece that always makes the headlines, and you trash talk him, right? Oh, we just signed him to the highest paid contract. A contract in which you waited so long for to sign, right? They absolutely stink when it comes to contract extensions, right? They do a great job, and I mean an excellent job at bringing players in, right? The draft, right, is a huge part. Free agency, they're non-existent now, right? So the free agency, throw that idea out the wall. But drafting players, they're pretty solid, right? You got to tip the cap. But the minute players are drafted, after 2 to 3 years, the Cowboys just don't know how to function as a team with that player. They don't. We saw it with CeeDee Lamb. He had to hold out. They had to pay him a bunch more money. Same thing with Dak Prescott, right? The Zeke situation from a couple of years ago, he held out. They made him a very highly paid player that has come back to bite him in the butt. So, and now they're doing it again with Micah Parsons. It's a never-ending cycle, right? And so, this doesn't help Ryan Schottenheimer in his first year, right? I think he's done a great job, at least from what I've read, what I've seen. He's done a great job of creating a culture in his first year, right? Players really seem to be digging this dude. I remember one point in the offseason during, the height kind of the contract negotiations, uh, Brian Schottenheimer got a call from Micah. Micah was just pranking him, being like, hey, good night, as the trend was going viral on social media. And Brian Schottenheimer turned it into this nice, sweet, message of, confidence, determination in Micah. And obviously you could tell Micah was enjoying to love it. And Brian Schottenheimer said, hey, man, we're going to figure out this contract thing and you're going to ball out for this year. And it's one of those, huge moments, or I guess one of those moments between a coach and a player that you just love to see, right? The coach has the players back. And I truly believe that. I think at this point, the front office has completely alienated themselves from the players and the coaching staff. And it's kind of a shame because, again, this isn't the Cowboys' year. They're not close. I'll dive more into them, but I think their ceiling is a wild card berth. But this clearly doesn't help. This just creates angst between the players and the front office, right? This could be a drain of motivation for some players, right? It's like, because most of the time, players are playing for their next contract. They're playing for a living, basically. They're not playing to win Super Bowls. They're not playing to make Pro Bowls. They're playing to put food on the table for their family. And when the person that pays your bills is talking smack about players that deserve it the most, how are you going to feel, when you're on a 1 year, $5 million contract and you're like, all right, I can kind of dog in, jump ship after this year, right? That's not positive for the culture. That's not positive for your team. So, it's kind of on Brian Schottenheimer, Dax, and when he signs, but Micah's doing a great job showing up to camp, which you got to love, about really continuing the culture and, blocking out the internal noise, right? You always hear these teams blocking out the external noise, but now they have to do that internally, which shouldn't happen. It should not happen. But it's, life of being a Cowboys player and a Cowboys fan, I'm glad all the Cowboys fans, well, majority of them, I should say, have finally been demystified by Jerry Jones, right? It took me a while. I thought it was always a Jason Garrett thing, and it was. He obviously played a part in it. But majority-wise, it was, the head coach, I thought. But now, as I've seen it, it's a Jerry Jones problem. And, when he's the owner, you can't really fire him. So you kind of have to, do your best this season. And I think this will somewhat reflect on their record, which is unfortunate. But it is what it is. Jerry Jones continuing to make headlines, as always, here on Cowboys training camp. And we didn't even make it to day 2 when this happened. This happened on Monday, which goes to show craziness. But we will talk a little bit about some, training camp news on Monday, or on Friday, as I should say. Another episode on Friday. Kind of give our week 1 recap of training camp from what I've read and what I've seen so far on clips on social media. And I've already seen some cool clips about Cowboys Twitter. I'm looking to see some other teams and how they're doing so far. So I'm excited about that. So make sure you tune in on Friday for my thoughts about the training camp week 1 recap. But that'll do it for this Jerry Jones segment. Now let's transition a little bit into my top 5 NBA wingmen. I am super duper excited about this segment. It took me a while to create these graphics, so hopefully you guys enjoy. It is Kobe Bryant. This is Shaq era Kobe Bryant, right? Won 3 titles. He was an elite scorer still at this point, or I guess he was an elite scorer before he kind of became his own beast. But he was like the top co-star, right? 3 rings, was always the number 2, helped him to that early Lakers dynasty. I mean, I felt weird putting it on here because, you don't necessarily consider Kobe a number 2. But at this point in his career, he was a deadly number 2. And unfortunately, him being a number 2 kind of led to the breakup of, that Lakers dynasty with him and Shaq. And eventually, he was able to become the alpha, but He was great with the Lakers. I felt like I had to include him here on this list. Then we go into number 4, which is Manu Ginobili. This guy, very underrated, all-time great. Very, very, very underrated. This guy, 4-time NBA champion. He was, the 6th man on the team, but he was like a very elite talent. You would never see that in today's game unless it's a player that's aged out, coming off the bench, balling out. Manu Ginobili was that guy. He was crafty, clutch, unpredictable, and he was kind of the heart of the Spurs dynasty, right? Obviously, a Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, but you don't really have that team. That team doesn't really function without Manu Ginobili. So you did win more than Kobe. That's why he's ranked above Kobe. Obviously, Kobe's a much better player than Manu Ginobili, but in terms of wingmen, Manu's the man. Then at number 3, we have Klay Thompson. We have, one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA. The dude, insane. 4-time NBA champion. You could say, was he technically a 2, the second option, the wingman when KD was there, right? Was he technically the third option? Still, doesn't matter. He is, maybe the greatest 3-and-D player of all time. This guy was an elite defender. He still is an above average defender in the current NBA. But when you think of peak Klay, as we're kind of talking about here, I mean, this guy was 30-something points on 5 dribbles, right? 61 points, just an insane stat line. 60 points in 29 minutes on 11 dribbles. Excuse me, Klay Thompson's the best, best shooter on this list from 3. Just truly a remarkable career, and it's still not over yet. If he could win another one, oh man, he's climbing up there too on the all-time 3-point list. I don't have those numbers necessarily, but we'll get to that eventually. Then at number 2, we have Scottie Pippen, right? The original, the OG, Scottie Pippen, right? 6-time NBA champion, 10-time All-Defensive Team, and he could score, right? He was solid on the offensive side of the ball, right? When you think of Batman and Robin, you think of, MJ and Scottie Pippen. This guy was great. Then at number 1, we have the man, Chris Middleton. Now look, you may be like, what are you talking about? How is Chris Middleton your best wingman all time? Well, you got to look at who his guy was. Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? One of the greatest players of all time, right? But this team does not win. This team does not function without Chris Middleton. Just by his looks alone, he strikes fear into the enemy team. But, right, he's a 1-time champion, the fewest rings on this list, but he hit multiple clutch shots in that playoffs. A reliable scorer from the mid-range. I mean, the dude's deadly. It's Chris Middleton. You sleep at night and you think of Chris Middleton, right? You're eating cereal, you think of Chris Middleton. When you're reading a book, you're like, Chris Middleton. He's just everywhere, right? And he is the best wingman in NBA history. I just can't stop thinking about Chris Middleton, man. He's the best. But yes, this will do it for the list. If you want to see where, the inside joke of this comes from, go follow me on social media. Go follow me on TikTok. You'll see this on TikTok. Shout out Chris Middleton. Yeah, obviously this list would look a little different. The top 4's there. If you think about it. But honestly, maybe even a top 5. Just rearrange it a little bit. But yes, that'll do it for this top 5 segment. Something short, something sweet. I'm excited about it. I had the nice little graphics. Looked very professional here on the YouTube. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, give me a follow, give me a like. I really appreciate it. If you're following me on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, like the video. You can also listen to podcasts on YouTube, right? You don't. It's not necessarily just the video. You can listen to the audio. It's there. Just go to the channel page and go over to the podcast tabs, and you'll see You Don't Know Jack right there for you to listen. So, yeah, that'll do it for this Wednesday episode. I'll see you guys again on Friday. Thank you for listening to You Don't Know Jack. I'm Jackson James. I'll see you guys later.